Good morning, Principal Madam.
Good morning, Greta madam. We'll wait for some time. Speaker has come. She's there.
Yes, ma'am, she's here.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah. Will be definitely. I think today's topic will be definitely fruitful for my students also, and it is the latest issue, so that we
Yes.
can have a good talks on this subject.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, madam. Like you have accepted our invitation. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of IQAC and Library Committee of HCPS College of Law, I'd like to firstly extend a very warm welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Aradhana Talwar, for accepting our humble invite for enlightening us on the topic Ukraine-Russia crisis and public international law. I'd like to thank our patrons of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti, Dr. Rajendra Singh, Honorable President, and Dr. Usha Mukundan, Honorable Director, for giving us this platform. I'm delighted to have the gracious presence of our Principal Madam, Dr. Mrs. Madhura Kadamkar, extending a warm welcome to legal practitioners, students, and my dear colleagues. To quote Paul Kirby while he opens his explanatory BBC News article on Ukraine-Russia crisis, he says that when Putin shattered the peace in Europe by unleashing war on a democracy of 44 million people, his justification was that modern, Western leading Ukraine was a constant threat and Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist. But after weeks of bombardment, thousands of deaths, and displacement of 10 million people inside Ukraine and beyond, the question remains, what is this war aim and is there a way out? In today's webinar, let us learn about the reasons for the war, the long-term repercussions in terms of power distribution, world peace, and its impact on the future trajectory of the world development. I would like to invite Ms. Bhumika Mandal, student of FY BLS, to introduce the esteemed guest speaker for the day. Bhumika, please unmute.
Now is my voice audible?
No, you'll have to be a little louder and clearer. I think she dropped off.
Greta, madam.
Yes.
Dr. Aradhana Talwar is currently a lead academics and curriculum Dalham Learning Bengaluru. She is heading the academic team of Dalham Learning, which is a multidisciplinary knowledge organization working in the field of liberal education. She holds a doctorate from Center of West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. Her PhD work has been a foreign policy of Syria and specialization in Middle East or West Asian affairs. She has been awardee of ICSSR doctoral fellowship. She has obtained BA degree with major in political science from St. Xavier's College of Mumbai. Her publications include journal article, chapters in edited books, write-ups for think tanks, magazines, and mainstream newspapers, Financial Express, focusing on West and South Asia. She has also been a part of panel discussions of regional TV news channels, Gujarat Samachar TV, on various current issues on international relations. Previously, she has worked as assistant professor at Department of Political Science, St. Xavier's College of Mumbai, and Asian Studies University School of Creative Liberal Education, Jain University of Bangalore.
Thank you, Bhumika. May I please invite Dr. Mrs. Madhura Kalamkar, our principal madam, to address the gathering?
Yes, thank you, Greta madam. Very warm good morning to all of you. And on behalf of the Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti College of Law, I welcome our Honorable President, Dr. Rajendra Singh sir, Dr. Usha Mukundan madam, Director of HPPS Family, all my teachers, staff, students, and our today's guest speaker, Dr. Aradhana Talwar. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation on talks of today's topic, that is Ukraine and Russia crisis. Yes, this topic is really touching topic to the every hearts of the country's people. But on this, I can share some little bit views what I have gone through with the newspapers and the material available on the net. So on that basis, I can say that whatever decision is been taken by our country, our prime minister, is like they want peace and friendship. So on that basis, our acceptance with the to accepting the crude oil from the Russia, because they want to maintain the peace, and that is a very biggest problem. Ki how to balance with the these countries. What our country have taken a very good step in that case. And if we are aware about the war which was happened in the year 1971 between the Bangladesh, that was the time where when Russia actually come forward to help us, when the America was like backing behind the Pakistan, and I think in the year 1971, India has signed the peace and friendship treaty with the Soviet Union to lay down the foundations of glorious victory in the war of this liberation of Bangladesh. So the reason for the conflict was like the border dispute, Kashmir problem, water dispute, and some terrorism was there. So despite being initiated these wars and conflicts by the Pakistan, these all are ended up with the defeat and disaster for the Pakistan. And that time Russia was the only country who helped us to stop this war. And that was the real reason why our country is like taking such an initiative to accept the crude oil from the Russia. And why this particular step is very important to maintain, but obviously the peace, whatever treaty we have signed. And I today also gone through with the newspaper where I found that many of our companies, they are selling their product. Okay, they are selling their product on a same price, same quality, but little bit lesser quantity. The reason behind is that ki we we are not, we are like we are also have not able to get the sufficient necessary food items what are necessary for the preparation of some products. So that is the reason we have taken a step, our country have taken a step to come forward and accept the proposal from the Russia. So whatever decision was taken, but obviously that is for the balancing of the countries and for peaceful maintenance. So this was the thing. Many questions have arisen with our students. on this topic. So what is better and what is good and what is right, everything will be explained by our today's speaker, and I hope she will definitely guide and give a sufficient knowledge on today's this crucial topic. So thank you, madam, for accepting our invitation, and we are waiting for your guidance on this topic. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Principal Ma'am, for drawing that background for us. It was nice to place India in the international forum and the very strategic decisions that India has had to make. It has set good ground for us to begin the webinar today. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Aradhana Talwar, please take over.
Thank you so much, Greta. Very good morning to everyone. It's Saturday morning, 9:15. So having so many students and faculty here on this webinar, it motivates me and I'm sure everyone to discuss and debate on the topic that has been given today. Firstly, I want to thank Rajendra sir, Usha ma'am, and Madhura ma'am for giving me the opportunity, and of course, our event coordinator, Ms. Greta, for giving me this opportunity to interact with the young minds. And on such a crucial topic, as Madhura ma'am rightly set the tone, on saying that it's a very, very crucial topic. And yes, I agree to it, because not just because it is occupying the main headlines from past 1 month or so, but each directly and indirectly affects our country as well. Although geographically we may be far, but in terms of geostrategics, geopolitics, economy, it definitely, and of course diplomacy, it has an impact on India as well. And which is why we need to know a little deeper about the whole crisis, of course, within the parameters of international law, and what role India should take, or what role has India taken a positive or not so positive role, which is what we will be discussing today. So I will divide my presentation. I wouldn't call it a presentation because I am getting this rare opportunity to meet the students and discuss and connect with them. So what I will do is I'll keep it little short, my part, and I will take as many questions. So I will request everyone to, towards the end, write your queries in the chat box, and I will be very, very happy to answer them. Now, before I start, I will just share my screen and I'll share the PPT that will give an idea of how the session is broken up, and then I can start discussing each of these points. So, the title the webinar is on Ukraine-Russia crisis and public international law. I'll begin with understanding first little bit about international law and why is it important. And I will see it from the lens of international relations, its importance in global politics, how international law has evolved through conventions and institutions, how international law has acquired multidisciplinary approach, and very importantly, the linkage today between international law, foreign policy making, geostrategic, and geopolitics, focusing on three important concepts: spheres of influence, state sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Now, why I emphasize on these three concepts is because these are what the words of most of the countries that have a call or their opinion on the ongoing crisis, including United Nations. And the concept of war, along with laws of war, a little bit, again, they also they are important in international law, and they also stress on these three concepts. Then I will move on, linking it to Russia-Ukraine crisis within the sphere of these three concepts of sphere of influence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. So I'll help understand the crisis through the angle of these three perspectives or concepts. And towards the end, I will try to throw some debate or light on: has international law been effective in the ongoing crisis in terms of refugee issues, resolving the real issues of sphere of influence? What has been the role of international organizations such as UN and its charter? And of course, I will be taking questions, and I will, in fact, have a short segment on India's role in the ongoing crisis. So, this I thought I will share the outline to begin with, and this will help us to understand. So, firstly, because I know that everyone here or most of us are from law background, international law is a very important subject, highly spoken about in different fields, not just in legal area, but also in international relations or global politics, as we would say, foreign policy, geopolitics, geostrategy of today. So international law becomes extremely crucial. In fact, the official standing of our country's foreign policy has always been that India has a principled foreign policy based on international law and respect to UN Charter, which implies that India respects sovereignty, territorial integrity of different countries, or rather of every country. Now, this is very important and forms the core of our foreign policy making, is because we are a colonial state formed nation, and hence we know the importance of sovereignty, territorial integrity, which again forms the core of international law today. So I do not see international law, public international law, only from the lens only of a legal perspective, but I feel that it is extremely important in um, international relations or understanding global politics as well. Now, very simply understood, what is international law? International law is a set of norms, rules that are extremely important to conduct the behavior of nation states in the global arena. It is kind of provides a conceptual framework and a normative guidelines within which states behave. And I believe that international law has evolved right from its origin to now, including not only or monitoring not only the behavior of nation states, but also of individuals within nation who are responsible for acts of war crimes, genocide, or aggression. So international law has today evolved in its scope and nature. And as I said, it has acquired a multidisciplinary approach where it is not only from a legal perspective, but also from different angles, and has become extremely crucial in foreign policy making as well. So if I'm a foreign policy analyst or if I'm an international relations analyst, I cannot ignore international law. So that is the importance of international law today, and more so, it has become talk of the town with the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine. So I will discuss that in the later part. Now, over the period of time, as we know, how international law has evolved through customary practices, through different treaties, conventions, important being, for example, the Geneva Conventions that do not only cover wounded people in conflict, but also different segments who are affected by the conflicts, including your refugees, including people, civilians, prisoners of war, treatment given to them, etc. So that has widened immensely the scope of international law. I'm taking it from an angle of this convention. Similarly, you have various other conventions like Hague Conventions that dealt with conduct of warfare, etc. And we also have international bodies in place. So today, what we hear and we are hearing of international body like International Criminal Court, ICC, ICJ, International Criminal Court of Justice, International Court of Justice. These are very important institutions who ensure the faith of humanity in international law. So the recent ongoing crisis that is happening, here also you have countries resorting to ICC for resolving this conflict. So I assume that, for example, ICJ is part of United Nations, which solve disputes among and between states. And you have International Criminal Court, which goes a step further in resolving conflicts that involve the role of individuals within a given country in terms of war crime, genocide, and war of aggression. So this is how international law today has become extremely important, and hence when we talk about Russia-Ukraine crisis, you cannot ignore international law. Now, when I speak or how I look at it, the crisis today is that uh, the core remains the concept of war. So, war plays a very core or has a role in international law, wherein there is an intense armed conflicts between or among states, groups, non state actors, etc., that has led to massive casualties across the globe. And war eventually has evolved in its character and feature, which is why international law has also evolved in its scope today. And when I talk about law or laws of war that deal or monitor how the war has started, what is the behavior or conduct of warring parties, this has led to the focus on crucial concepts like sovereignty, state, statehood, territory, sphere of influence, which is exactly what this crisis has brought to fore among the policymakers today. So, today, if you read the statements of most of the diplomats, ambassadors who are representing individual country at United Nations, including leaders of United Nations, they have used right from the start of this crisis concepts of sovereignty, sphere of influence, and territorial integrity. This highlights and showcases that how much each country wants international law to be applied and to bring about a peaceful resolution of this ongoing crisis. Now, if I talk about the current crisis and now how I will look at it is using these concepts of sphere of influence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Now, before that, who are the actors involved? So, for to begin with, it's a crisis between Russia and Ukraine, both earlier being part of erstwhile USSR or Soviet Union, as we would call it. Within USSR, Russia formed or constituted the largest region, followed by Ukraine. So today, after the disintegration of USSR, Ukraine stays or stood to be one of the largest countries in Europe. In fact, some also say the largest country in Europe. Strategically, economic wise, the country is extremely important in Europe. It is having ports to the south. It is a gateway to a lot of, it joins or it plays a very crucial role in the functioning of economy of Europe as a whole. So it is a very, very important country, even if I see geostrategically. Now, in terms of the relations that Russia and Ukraine share, it's very important to understand that it is history that plays a very important role. So both the countries share a very strong common historical traditions, culture, and narratives, which is why that becomes the solid foundation today of this ongoing crisis. So when I understand Russia-Ukraine crisis, simply yes, it's the NATO enlargement versus Russia's role in invading or invasion or acts of aggression in Ukraine. But it needs to be understood through the lens of, as I said, the concepts of sphere of influence, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. Now, when I see from one perspective, which is mostly given by the Western scholars, because I will try to show both the perspectives. So it's up to you students to decide or take or make an informed opinion, and you will understand why India has taken a stand which it has today. So if I see from a Western scholar perspective, sphere of influence plays a very important role in Russia's reasoning of invading Ukraine today. As I said, sphere of influence is basically carving out a territory wherein you have your dominance at the border areas of your state to ensure that there is no threat to your border, to your territory, to your territorial integrity and sovereignty, and you keep such threats at a bay. So, spheres of influence, if I see in the recorded history, it is not a new concept. It has been repeated over a period of time by different actors and players. So, today we have Russia We also had earlier US, another superpower that has carved out its respective spheres of influence in different parts of the globe. So, as I speak of spheres of influence, it is very obvious and understood by Western scholars that the crux of Putin's invasion of Ukraine is to give a strong message to the West that Putin is here to carve out an unquestioned sphere of influence, which includes this part of the region, which is Ukraine, which was earlier USSR. Now, if I'll take you back a little in history, this conflict is not an overnight conflict. It has its root in history, as I mentioned. It happened earlier as well in 2014 when Russia took over Crimea, which is the southern part of Ukraine. And the crisis and the seeds for this current ongoing crisis has been sown right from 2014 onwards. And in fact, before that as well. So in 2014 there was an interview taken, and that time Vladimir Putin, who is the Russian president, he used or invoked a historic concept of Novorossiya, which is Novorossiya, which means that in history there was a large swath of territory that was of Romanovs that during the imploding of Ottoman Empire. Now you understand the whole crisis. Putin sees it from this angle. That means that Eastern Slavic area of Europe is the undisputed sphere of influence of Russia. So it is not an overnight conflict, as I said. The seeds have been sown in the history itself. Now, the ultimate objective of Putin is not only to gather the former Soviet republics under one federation, but also to give a clear-cut message to the West that Russia is here to play an important role or wants to play an important role in European politics, either through institutional ways or through use of power. So this is one message that Putin absolutely wants to give to the West, not today, right from the start. And Putin has made it very clear that enlargement of NATO is something, a threat to territorial integrity and sovereignty of Russia itself. So this is the the Western scholars' perception of the ongoing crisis, where largely and solely the blame is only on Russia. Russia's aggression in Ukraine, with its unquestionable or undisputed sphere of influence quest in Eastern Europe. If I see from this perspective, from Russian scholars, how they understand, not just Russian scholars, in fact shared by many scholars across the globe, they believe that the ongoing crisis is not solely the responsibility of Russia, but equally responsible are the West and its allies. So how they see the conflict is, as I said, it is not an overnight phenomena, but the roots have been, or the seeds have been sown right from the disintegration of USSR. So once USSR disintegrated in 1991, you had independent states coming up, Ukraine, Russia, etc., and lot many other countries in that part of the world. And what happened was that immediately after that, there was a tacit understanding between the West and Russia that the West will not expand through military alliances in the eastern part of Europe. And Russian leaders believed it. However, with the coming of Bill Clinton, former US president in 90s, there was an effort made by the West to enlarge its scope militarily or economic wise towards the eastern part of Europe, which was earlier understood to be a buffer zone between Russia and the West. See, any great powers sharing territory, sharing geography, prefer to keep a certain amount of land as a buffer zone. This is to avoid any escalation any extreme aggression. This is in the interest of peaceful resolution, if any, of any conflict. So similarly, what happened was right from 90s onwards, an effort was made to enlarge the NATO, to bring in the economic modernization of these countries, which are the eastern part, which today Russia or Vladimir Putin, I would say, I wouldn't even say Russia, I would say Putin claims to be part of the sphere of influence of Russia today. Now, for example, in 1999, members like Poland, Czech Republic were given membership of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is a West-led military alliance. Immediately after that, in 2004, again, you had four more countries becoming part of NATO. For example, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia. Again, these countries are bordering Ukraine today and also right very close to the border of Russia. However, it was in 2008 when the West made an announcement that the aspirations of Ukraine and Georgia in becoming the member of NATO will be fulfilled in the future. This was when it triggered a strain in relationships, more strain in relationships between Russia and the West. Itself in 2008, I'm not, the Russian former or deputy foreign minister had made a statement that if Ukraine becomes or Georgia becomes part of NATO, it will have a devastating consequences for the globe. And I'm taking you back to the history because see, it's 2022 and this happened in 2008. This is international politics field, right? In fact, in one of the conversations of Vladimir Putin with George Bush, or I think Barack Obama, one of the presidents, he very explicitly hinted that if um, Ukraine becomes anytime part of NATO, that country will cease to exist. So I am not going into the justification or non-justification part of it, but I'm throwing light on facts and history that have happened in the past. And hence this conflict or crisis which is ongoing today, the seeds have been sown right in the history itself. And 2004 onwards, Russia, she completely changed its attitude towards the West, wherein it did not bother to equivocate its relationships with the West because they knew that NATO enlargement is on the card, on the table for the West. And that something is what Russia could not take it well and will not take it well because it questions or penetrates into their sphere of influence. Now, US very categorically today is critical of Russia's policy of sphere of influence and encroaching territorial integrity and sovereignty of another country. Yes, if I see from a legal perspective, it's absolute violation of UN Charter, which talks about respecting each other's integrity, sovereignty, and call for peace. But we, as I said, we are in international politics era where it is all about geopolitics, geostrategy. The countries today that are also uh, pinpointing at the aggression, I also have a question, counter question to these same countries that what about the wars in Syria? What about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq? My work has been on Syria, and I know that for sure more than 60% of the population has become a refugee population today for no fault of theirs. So I draw a parallel between these wars and the ongoing crisis. I do not see the crisis in isolation of the rest of the wars because those wars in Middle East or West Asia, as I said, about Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, were also wars for sphere of influence. It encroached, it violated international law because you invaded sovereign territory, sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations. So my question then is to both Russia and the West, where do you draw the line? Right? When you ask a question, who is right and wrong? I don't have a clear answer to this because I don't take the crisis in isolation. As I said, wars have been happening. What role did international organizations or the countries that today are propagating international peace, what role did they take when these wars happened earlier as well? So I come from a very perspective or lens of Indian diplomacy. For me, a war is a war. It cannot be a right war, it cannot be a wrong war, it cannot be justified. And hence, I, like my Indian diplomacy, I stand for a principled foreign policy for which I am for humanitarian resolution of the crisis, be it Ukraine, be it Afghanistan, be it Syria, or be it Iraq. Have we taken into consideration these principles when earlier wars also have happened? India did. India did, which today again India is taking today itself. So this is how I see the crisis through the lens of sphere of influence, territorial integrity, sovereignty, linking it to international law, and how the superpowers in history have tried to carve out the niche, their spheres of influence in different parts of the globe, thereby causing immense or adverse impact to the population across the countries, not just restricted to one geography or one country. So, this is my understanding of the crisis. And as rightly set the tone by Madhura ma'am regarding India's stand, and I'm sure a lot of queries, questions, curiosity about India's diplomacy, India's role, and what India should do in the war. See, if I see from an Indian perspective, again, foreign policy perspective, I break the war or the crisis, I wouldn't say a war, a crisis, into different angles. A, geostrategy, geopolitics, B, economy. If I see from a geostrategic, geopolitical perspective from India's lens, the shift has suddenly moved from Indo-Pacific to this part of the world. India, till now, has been making immense and fruitful efforts towards making Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific, as the core element of foreign policy or geostrategic concerns of many nations. And suddenly, this crisis has shifted the attention of the international community, also of India, towards this part of geography. Now the question comes, we are geographically distant. Why should we worry? We should worry. Definitely. And I'll tell you why. We have two superpowers involved in this crisis with which India shares amazing and strong relations with both of them. So Russia, categorically, India sees it as its old and reliable friend. The relationship is referred to as a old privileged friendship. And as Madhura ma'am rightly pointed out, Russia in the past has been India's strong ally, reliable ally in the wars that we had with Pakistan. You name it, 1971, that is your India-Pakistan war, for Bangladesh, we are Kargil war. So Russia has been a very, very reliable superpower ally when I talk from Indian perspective. US, on the other hand, is a very important strategic partner of India when it comes to economy and Quad, that is your Indo-Pacific. So India right now very admirably has balanced its take on the ongoing crisis, balancing between the countries among the nations. And in fact, just yesterday, I was watching our India's foreign minister giving address to the press, where he repeatedly said that India's stand on this ongoing crisis is based on a principled foreign policy which is respect to international law, the United Nations Charter, and we are all for peaceful resolution of the crisis. So I do not, or I fail to understand when India's stand has been called shaky or critical or criticized by different leaders across the globe. I think India, by taking a stand that India is taking right now, by calling out for peaceful resolutions of the crisis, by feeling for the humanitarian or helping out humanitarian in terms of humanitarian assistance, India is not playing safe. And let me break that myth. By having a neutral stand, I don't interpret India's stand to be playing safe. It is simply having strategic autonomy for ourselves, where we do not associate ourselves with any military alliance whatsoever of any bloc. That has always been a consistent stand of India in international relations, and I fail to understand why is it shaky. It has been consistent. So India should take a stand wherein our strategic autonomy is far more important for us. India should take a stand wherein our national interest prevails over any alliance with any ideology. And India's stand has to be and has always been pragmatic and practical to the changing situations. So India, yes, has to deal with Russia because it is one of, or not one, it is the largest defense supplier to us. More than 60% of our defense equipments come from Russia. And we need defense equipments because of our geography. We have two nations right at the border that make it extremely important for us to have a sound defense policies and preparedness. Secondly, India's relations with US is extremely important because with Russia it is majorly defense trade. With US it is 10 times the non-defense trade. So basically, if I say that trade with Russia, for example, I'm giving just an hypothetical figure, if it's 10 million trillion, $10 million multiply into 10 is what is India's trade, non-defense trade with Russia, US. So I feel that India has admirably balanced the two relations. And in fact, there have been leaders from the US itself who have made statements that yes, we respect India's historic and traditional relationship with Russia. So this is, and India also has to take into consideration the impact this crisis will have in future. If this crisis gets resolved today, or maybe few in some months or in years, I have no idea. But if it does, it will definitely, it's going to change the world order. It has already changed. So today's world order is no more bipolar. I believe it has become multipolar, not just multipolar, but multipolar, which means that countries have taken strong stand, are reorienting their foreign policies to the changing geopolitical scenario, and at the same time keeping it within the framework of international law. I believe, and this is just my prediction, if this crisis ends, we will have, we might have, I'm not very sure, I don't want to be assertive at this point, but we might have a Cold War 2.0 in which India will have to take pragmatic, practical stand and decisions, which India has already started the practice. If you see or if you read about Cold War era, India definitely had a principled foreign policy where we never allied with any one military bloc whatsoever. We might have our friendships, we might have bilateral relations with each and every country, that's different. Officially aligning yourself with any military bloc? No. Indian foreign policy never has space for that. So I think I see India's role till now being concrete. We have also brought a lot of carry or through our flights, our airways. Many Indians, we've saved their lives, brought them back safely to our country. That shows that yes, India's goodwill and software diplomacy has also played a very important role in that part of the world. And at the same time, India has not forgotten its relationship with Ukraine as well. I feel, and what my understanding is, that this is what Ukraine's ambassador to India had also pushed for right at the beginning of this crisis, that India plays third party mediator. I believe that India can play again a neutral third party mediator wherein it will leverage its relationship with Russia and at the same time bring both the parties on table for a peaceful resolution of the conflict because India is all for peace. So I think this is something we can try or we should work towards it. And having said that, this is the geopolitics, geostrategic part. If I see economically, it has an economic impact on India. We all of us are facing those who are making investments, share markets, of course, it's going down. We are feeling the heat. We cannot escape, which I said, geographically, we may be far, but in terms of geostrategic, geopolitics, economics, it has an impact. Now, I'll tell you how. Economically, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. So it supplies wheat to lot many countries of Middle East, North Africa, including some other countries in Asia. For example, there's a country, Lebanon, in West Asia or Middle East. More than half, 50% of its wheat comes from Ukraine. Now you see how it is going to have a ripple effect on the food crisis, food security issues across different countries. It will also have a certain impact on India, and I'll tell you why. Because with Russia and Ukraine, we also have trade ties wherein we import lot many important agricultural products. Say, for example, from Russia. Russia is one of the very important exporter to us when it comes to chemical fertilizers, potassium chloride, and edible sunflower oil. Now you see, this is related to our agricultural sector. So if not in this season, this next season of our agricultural crops, it certainly or it might have an impact. And similarly, Russia is also a very important source of nickel, which is again used in steel making industries in our country. So you see, economically, this is the reason why the share market or your investments or your market is very much in turmoil today, is because economically this crisis has an impact on India, right? What do we do? Well, Indian leaders right now are making effort, deciding on having, if at all, sanctions impact India. Then we have a ruble rupee mechanism wherein we do not take dollars into consideration in terms of trade. But having said that, still, I feel that it will be a little dicey because how do you determine the price of the currency when when the market is not stable? So these are certain concerns. And moving to the last, as I said, I feel that yes, India has done a remarkable job in the whole crisis scenario, how in dealing with it. But I still feel little step ahead is if we can play a neutral third party mediator or a little more proactive stand to bring the parties on table and to bring about a peaceful resolution of the conflict, which is in the interest of all the countries, right? So this is from my side, and I hope this will generate some curiosity, and I'm sure there will be questions which I will be very happy to take. What I can do is I'll request you all to please write in the chat box. It will make it easier because then it will give many other people also chance if they have any questions. I will compile them and I'll take questions, I will address them. So because if I go one on one, because we also have time constraints, it might not give others also a chance to ask, right? So this thank you so much once again, and now the floor is open for questions. You can ask questions in the chat box, and I will answer them. I hope I'll be doing justice. Okay, so there is when it comes to international, right? So Rashmi and Afreen have given their questions of what are the future arrangements in terms of laws if there occurs violation of agreed laws, and what international organizations is Russia part of. Now, very interesting question. So thank you for this. That shows that people are listening. See, my opinion is that, and this has been in the past as well, that United Nations, the structure is such that after a point, it playing a very effective role becomes a question mark when it comes to resolving a crisis. Now, United Nations General Assembly, as we all know, whenever it passes a resolution, which it is passing, by the way, it's ongoing. Recently, again, India abstained from resolutions wherein it held solely Russia responsible for the aggression and resolutions of humanitarian crisis. Now they have been passed, they are being discussed and debated. The idea is to generate a kind of opinion among the policymakers or among the countries of the globe towards this crisis. But beyond that, I have my doubts because United Nations General Assembly resolutions cannot be mandatorily imposed on any country whatsoever. Now, coming to United Nations Security Council, wherein you have 15 members, out of which um, you have 5 countries, P5, that have the veto power. Again, any resolution scope over there falls. Again, it's a drawback because Russia is one of the permanent member and it will veto. It has vetoed in the past. So, any resolution or any violation of international law norms and laws, again, is my question is that how far international law has been effective in resolving conflicts, not today, even in the past, right? Max, what I can see is that Ukraine has already filed its application in ICC, International Criminal Court, wherein Russia is not a member. And Ukraine is not a member, but since 2013, it has allowed the jurisdiction of ICC over its territory when it comes to war crimes or any act of aggression. So it has filed application. How I see it, that ICC may refer it to United Nations Security Council for an action to be taken. And this is the way I see. This is the maximum that international organizations or international institutions who are related to norms or laws can work upon. Now, initially also, countries have taken single-handed decision of invading countries or responding to war on terror, right? So that is a different story. But as far my understanding goes, that right now NATO, that is the West, US, is still waiting and watching. They might not directly involving themselves at the border of Russia, because that will definitely certainly escalate this crisis into the feared large scale war, which some also have already started saying that World War III. But I don't want to scare. I'm very hopeful, and I'm optimistic that some mechanisms fall place and are effective on resolving this crisis. And more importantly, Rashmi, answering your question, the other way, how I see international community taking a call if a country violates international law or norms is sanctions, economic sanctions, which they have already done. So they are going on. They have already imposed sanctions. That is another way of weakening the economy of the country that is in question, and in turn affecting or impacting the conclusion of the war or the crisis. So that could be one scenario that the countries that they have already resolved. But again, if I have to see from a geopolitical angle, sanctions, how far will they be helpful? I'm not really sure, because most of the Western Europe depends on Russia for oil and natural gas. And uh, do they have replacements? Do they have that much capacity to refill the vacuum of their energy, you know, quantity that has been given by Russia? I have my doubts, because it's going to shoot up the energy bills of these countries. So I am still waiting and watching the impact crisis the sanctions will have, how far they will be effective. I'm sure they will be to a certain extent, because whatever said and done, the common man in Russia is suffering. So let's see how this crisis takes a turn and what are the impact, right? Right. So we have more questions.
The next one is from Gautam and Advocate Shraddha Pandit. It's both the similar point. It says that the World War II was seemed like the failure of the League of Nations. So now with Ukraine Russia conflict, is it the failure of UN uh, and the ICJ to prevent this regional war? Could it culminate into World War III?
Right. Firstly, I want to say that as I am an optimist, and I belong to that strand of international relations where I do not believe immediate escalation of any crisis. I would not like to believe. So saying that it will culminate into World War III, I think it's a little too early. We can only wait and watch. Nothing official from any country has also been gone on stage on this regard. So I do not want to make any such statements or create that kind of fear psychosis. So I will wait and watch and see how it takes a turn, because as I said, in the past we also had war on Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, which fortunately did not escalate into a World War III situation. So I will keep that for future. Well, in terms of failure of United Nations, again there are two schools of thought to it. One school of thought believes that United Nations has failed in preventing wars in earlier in the past, especially when it involves superpowers, um, mainly Russia and US. So, and hence, a lot of policymakers are demanding for structural reforms in United Nations to make it more effective. And by that, they mean that uh, changing or bringing about reforms in United Nations Security Council, wherein only the permanent five, right now, five countries have the veto power. That itself makes a lot of resolutions or decisions ineffective. So the demand is, and India also is strongly pushing for membership in permanent membership of United Nations Security Council, and rightly so. So, what a lot of international relations scholars are demanding is that we need more countries, either in the United Nations Security Council, who have the veto power, say few countries from Asia, more from Latin America, right, from Southeast Asia, to make it more equitable, to make it more equal when it comes to states in international politics. Hopefully that can be a solution to make United Nations in general and United Nations Security Council more effective in future. However, having said that, there's another school of thought of international relations scholar that believe that United Nations is not ineffective. It has not failed. It works to materialize or to realize the Charter of United Nations, which is bringing peace and harmony between and among nations. This Charter and United Nations existence behaves or works as a deterrence to many countries who will think twice before going on a war. So there is one school of thought that believes that no, it has not failed. It may not be effective in terms of its resolutions not being binding, but at the same time, it has played a role of a deterrence wherein it may um, make the policymakers of the countries, warring countries, to think twice before taking any action. It certainly brings about debate, discussions on the crisis, and kinds of build up pressure, leads to economic sanctions on different countries. So, having coming from that school of thought will not believe that United Nations has become effective or has failed, right? So I hope I'm doing justice, because given a time constraint, I wish this topic is such we can go for a day or two or three. And I actually don't mind, because there is so many aspects for this crisis and this conflict that we need to discuss. But I'm still very happy and grateful that we got this time to discuss, and that too on a Saturday morning. And all of you are so enthusiastic about it. So that just motivates us. Now, I have more questions. So, are we India? So there's a question, last question. Okay, is India prepared for the war's ripple effects? Absolutely, absolutely. I believe that India's policy, foreign policy is principled, but I do not doubt on any aspects of India's strength, be it diplomacy, foreign policy, or military. But one thing I'm very sure that India has never and will never take part militarily in any crisis, and it should not. As I said and I explained, that India has or shares strong relations with both Russia and US. So India will definitely, the military option is out of the box for Indian policymakers. It will never. In terms of diplomacy, yes, India has prepared and is preparing itself, because day by day, as the war unfolds, or as I would say, as the crisis unfolds, Indian policymakers are monitoring the entire happening of this crisis, and accordingly taking decisions, giving out statements, foreign policy statements. Recently, for example, yesterday we had Chinese leader visiting India, or China's leader visiting India, and one of the topics discussion was Ukraine. And India again reiterated that it is India's principal stand towards the crisis, where it is calling for peace and respect for international law within the framework of UN United Nations Charter. So India is absolutely prepared and is preparing itself, because if we over here can think of what can be the future, the foreign policy makers have already thought it 10 times ahead of it, what it's going to be the next year like. As I said, this war is not only geostrategic, geopolitics, also economics. So we are taking decisions that also serve or saves India from any negative economic impact of this crisis on us. So yes, India is prepared diplomatically and peacefully, and using peaceful ways to resolve the conflict, right? So I think this was the last question. I wish I could take more, but I'm one request I can have is to the event coordinators, in case you have more questions coming to you from students, you can pass on them to me, and I will be sending it in mail form or whatever the replies to those queries, because I love the curious minds of young people, students. They also help us think a lot of issues from different perspectives. So I will, I request the event coordinator, Greta, that if there are any more queries, you can send it to me, and I'll be very happy to address them and pass on to them, so that you can share with the students. So thank you so much again, Rajendra sir, Usha ma'am, and Madhura ma'am, for giving me this chance, and 100 plus students today for attending this webinar. I cannot believe it was Saturday morning, and this attendance I was not prepared or ready for. And thank you, our event coordinator, Miss Greta, for giving me the opportunity. And I hope I have done some justice. I'm not absolutely claiming, but some justice to help students understand this crisis from different perspectives, and more importantly, India's role in this crisis. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am,
Greta, you're on mute.
ma'am, there's a stream of gratitude coming in even on YouTube. Even here on Zoom, I've restricted messages only to the host. But rest assured, there's a lot of people feeling enlightened at the end of the session. Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm going to be posting the feedback link here for everyone to fill it up, while Miss Niharika Thakur will here will profess the vote of thanks. Yes, Niharika.
Yes, ma'am. A very warm morning to the respected dignitaries and my HVPS family as well. I, Miss Niharika Thakur, extend a warm vote of thanks to all of you. It is such an honor for me to get this opportunity. I thank our management of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti, starting with Mr. President Dr. Rajendra Singh Sir, Director Dr. Usha Mukundan Ma'am, and my sincere and special thanks to our beloved principal, Dr. Mrs. Madhura Kalamkar ma'am, for tireless efforts and perpetual support in organizing this webinar. I extend my gratitude to our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Aradhana Talwar ma'am, to take out time from her busy schedule to grace this event. Thank you for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this topic. As ma'am has discussed about the international laws, India's neutral and balanced stand, the geostrategies about Indian Ocean and relationship that India has maintained from both the countries, I truly agree with you, ma'am, on this point. I thank our IQAC coordinator, Amar Salve sir, and the event coordinator, Ms. Greta Castellino, ma'am. I would also like to thank our organizing committee for working hard for the past few days to make this event possible. This webinar is a very successful one, so our organizing committee has worked hard for it. I also thank our participants, our legal practitioners, our teaching faculty, and all the students from around the country on Zoom platform as well as on the YouTube platform. Thank you. I'm signing off.
Thank you, Niharika. With Principal Ma'am's permission, may I end the meeting?
Yes, Greta madam, and thank you, Dr. Aradhana madam, for having such a wonderful session, and looking forward with you such other some sessions on this same topic with the upcoming new crisis, whatever happened in future. So on that topic also, we'll expect some talks with you again. So thank you, Dr. Aradhana madam, and yes, Greta madam, we can close with this session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madhura ma'am. It'll be my pleasure to come on board again and interact with such an amazing crowd, and who have so many questions, and with under your supervision. So I'll always be there. So you can let me know, and I'll love to be part of any international relations topic, not just Ukraine, Russia, anything else also, Indian foreign policy. We're open for discussion. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll end the meeting now.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, ma'am. And actually, we'll have some special talks on this NATO also. Like, I think 30 countries are there under this NATO organization, and also why 15 countries. 15 countries I think get separated from the Russia. I think in the year 1991. So we'll have some special discussion on this topic again. So thank you so much, madam, being with us. And Greta, madam, yes, please go ahead with the